I want to tell you about two men I once knew. They were given the same field, same soil, same tools, same season, same sky overhead. One man looked at that field and saw dirt. The other man looked at that field and saw a harvest that had not yet been planted. Same field, two entirely different worlds. Now, I want to ask you something, and I want you to sit with it honestly. When you look at your life right now, not the life you dream of, but the life you are actually living, which man are you? Because here is what I have learned after many years of studying success and failure, prosperity and poverty, being the people who built remarkable lives and the people who only ever talked about building one. The difference was never the field. The difference was never the tools, the timing, the economy, or the luck. The difference was always what the man believed about himself before he ever picked up the spade. And that is what I want to talk to you about today. Not strategy, not tactics, not a formula you write on a card and tape to your mirror. I want to talk to you about identity, about sequence, about the order in which transformation actually works. Because most people have it completely backwards. And until they turn it around, no amount of effort, no amount of hustle, no amount of wishing will move them a single inch toward the life they say they want. Stay with me. Ending it. Because what I am about to share with you is not new, it is ancient. And it is the reason some people walk into the same room as everyone else and leave with a completely different life. Let me give you the sequence as most people understand it. They say, first I need to have the money, then I do the things wealthy people do. And eventually, I will have become the kind of person who is wealthy. Have. Be. That is the order the world teaches. That is the order most people are waiting on right now, waiting to have something, a windfall, a promotion, a lucky break, an inheritance, before they feel permitted to act differently, before they feel permitted to be different. And I understand the logic. I do. It feels responsible. It feels humble. It feels like you are not getting ahead of yourself. But I want to tell you something plainly. That sequence is the formula for a lifetime of waiting. Because here is the truth. The sequence does not begin with having. It never did. It never will. The sequence that actually works, the sequence I have watched transform ordinary people into extraordinary ones, begins with being. Be. Do. Have. First, you decide who you are. You adopt the identity, the philosophy, the inner world of the person you intend to become. Not someday. Now, before the evidence arrives, before the bank account changes, before anyone else can see it, then from that place of being, you begin to do the things that person does, the disciplines, the habits, the daily practices, the decisions, and then, and only then, the having follows. Naturally, inevitably, as night follows day, be first, do second, have third. This is the sequence, and it is not complicated, but it is not easy either, because it requires something most people are reluctant to give. It requires you to become someone new before you have any proof that it will work, and that, my friend, is the real test. Not of your strategy, of your character. I have said it many times, and I will say it again, because it deserves to be said until it is truly heard. The philosophy you carry in your mind determines the life you carry on your back. Read that again, slowly. Your philosophy, not your circumstances, not your past, not the economy, not the people around you. Your philosophy, the collection of ideas, beliefs, and assumptions you have gathered and accepted as true. That is the weight you carry. That is the architecture of your results. Now, here is the question worth asking: where did your philosophy come from? For most people, the honest answer is uncomfortable. It came from wherever they happened to grow up, trending from whatever their parents believed about money, about work, about what people like them could and could not achieve. It came from the neighborhood, from the television, from the casual opinions of people who had never built anything worth admiring. In other words, most people are carrying a philosophy they never chose. They inherited it by default, and they are living out its instructions every single day without ever questioning whether those instructions are taking them somewhere worth going. I know this because I did it myself. For years, I carried a philosophy of lack, a philosophy that said life is hard, money is scarce, and people like me do not end up wealthy. I did not say those words out loud, but I lived them. Every decision I made was quietly shaped by that invisible belief system. And then a man I deeply respected said something to me that cracked the whole thing open. Bunny, he said, "You are not poor because you lack money. You are poor because you lack a philosophy that produces wealth." That sentence changed my life because it meant the problem was solvable. It meant the solution was inside me, not outside me. It meant I could change, not my circumstances first, but my thinking first. And the circumstances would follow. That is the beginning of the sequence. Examining the philosophy you carry, and then deliberately, courageously choosing a better one. Let me return to the two men I told you about at the beginning, because their story is not just a parable. It is a portrait of two different philosophies operating in identical conditions. The first man looked at the field and saw what was there. Dirt, rocks, work, uncertainty. He saw the effort required and weighed it against the outcome he could not yet see. And because he could not see the harvest, because it had not yet materialized into something he could point to, he decided the work was not worth it. Or he did the work half-heartedly. Or he did it waiting to be convinced, waiting for a sign, waiting for the field to give him a reason to believe before he gave it his best. He had the have, do-be sequence running in his mind. Show me the harvest first, then I will work, then I will believe. The second man looked at the same field and saw something entirely different. He saw potential. He saw a harvest that existed in his imagination as clearly and as certainly as if it were already standing in the sun. And because he could see it, because he had already become, in his mind, the man who tends this field and brings in this harvest, he worked differently. He worked with the energy of someone who already knew the outcome. He planted, he watered, he tended. He did not wait for the harvest to convince him. He let his belief in the harvest drive the work. And here is what I want you to understand. The soil did not know the difference between these two men. The seed did not know. The rain did not know. But the harvest knew, because the harvest is always a reflection of the farmer, not of the field. You are the farmer. Your life is the field. And the harvest you are living right now is an honest report on the philosophy you have been carrying, not a judgment, a report. And reports can change. The moment the farmer changes, here is where most people stumble. And I say this with great compassion because I stumbled here too. They wait for the evidence before they adopt the identity. They say, when I have the money, I will start thinking like a wealthy person. When I have the success, I will start carrying myself like a successful person. When I have the confidence, I will start acting with confidence. And so they wait, and they wait. But here is the law that governs this identity precedes evidence. Always. The evidence of wealth is not what creates the wealthy identity. The wealthy identity is what creates the evidence of wealth. Think of it this way. When a young tree is planted, it does not wait until it has produced fruit before it decides to grow roots. It grows roots first. Deep, invisible, underground roots that no one can see. And for a long time, there is no visible evidence of what is happening. The tree looks small. It looks unremarkable. Someone walking past might not even notice it. But underground, the work is happening. The identity of the tree, what it is designed to become, is already fully established. The fruit is not yet visible, but it is already inevitable. You are the tree. And the roots are your identity. What you believe about yourself, what you expect of yourself, what you hold as true about your own capacity and your own worth. Grow the roots first. Deepen them. Strengthen them. Do not wait for the fruit to convince you to grow roots. That is not how trees work. And it is not how people work either. The man or woman who waits for external evidence before adopting a wealthy identity will wait forever, because the universe does not work in that direction. It works from the inside out. They always from the inside out. Now, I want to be precise here, because when I say be the wealthy person first, I am not asking you to pretend. I am not asking you to put on a costume. I am not asking you to spend money you do not have or to tell people you are something you are not. Being is not performing. Being is an internal shift. It is a decision about how you see yourself, how you think about yourself, and what standards you hold yourself to quietly, privately, before anyone else is watching. Let me tell you what it looks like in practice. A person who has adopted the identity of a financially thoughtful, disciplined, growth-oriented individual, before they have the wealth to show for it, does certain things differently. They read differently. Not because someone is watching, because they are genuinely curious about how the world of finance and value and enterprise actually works. They have decided they are a student of wealth, and students study. They think differently about their time. They begin to ask, is what I am doing right now consistent with who I have decided to become? Not every hour, not perfectly, but consistently they run that quiet internal audit. Yundin, they speak differently to themselves first and foremost. The internal conversation shifts from I cannot afford this to how do I create the capacity for this? None, and not because the money is there yet. Because the identity says I am the kind of person who finds a way. They associate differently. They begin to seek out people who are further along the path. Not to impress them, to learn from them. Because they have decided they belong in that conversation. None of this requires money. None of it requires permission. None of it requires the harvest to be in before you start acting like a farmer. It only requires a decision, a firm, quiet, unshakable decision about who you are. That decision, made in private before the evidence arrives, is the beginning of everything. I want to talk to you about compounding. Not just the compounding of money, though that is real and powerful and worth understanding deeply. I want to talk about the compounding of identity. Here is the principle small disciplines practiced consistently compound over time into remarkable results. You have heard me say this before, perhaps? Easy to do, easy not to do, the slight edge. The daily choice that seems insignificant in the moment but is in truth the most significant choice of all. The same law applies to identity. Every time you act in alignment with the person you have decided to become, every time you make a decision that the wealthy, disciplined, growth-oriented version of you would make, you are making a deposit into the account of your identity. And here is the remarkable thing about that account. It compounds. The first deposit does not feel like much. You read for 30 minutes instead of watching television. You sit down and think carefully about your finances instead of avoiding the conversation. But you choose to spend an evening with someone who challenges you rather than someone who simply entertains you. These things feel small. They feel almost trivial. But they're not trivial. They are deposits, and deposits compound. After a week of such deposits, something subtle shifts. The identity feels a little more real, a little more yours. After a month, it feels natural. After a year, it is simply who you are. The wealthy person's habits are no longer an effort. They are an expression. And here is the other side of that coin. The side people prefer not to examine. Every time you act against the identity you say you want, every time you make the easy, comfortable, undisciplined choice, you are making a withdrawal. And withdrawals compound too, in the wrong direction. This is why the question is not, can I afford to start thinking like a wealthy person today? The question is, can I afford not to? Because every day you delay the identity shift, you are not standing still. You are compounding in the wrong direction. And the longer that continues, the more ground there is to recover. Start today, not tomorrow, not when things are easier today. If what you have heard so far is landing, if you feel the truth of this sequence settling somewhere real inside you, then I want you to do something right now. Not tomorrow. Right now. Subscribe to this channel. Because what I have shared with you in the first half of this conversation is only the foundation. The deeper we go, and we are about to go much deeper, the more clearly you will see why the identity shift is not just a nice idea. It is the only idea that actually works. Every week, we go into these principles with the kind of depth and seriousness they deserve, not surface-level motivation. Not empty phrases, the real philosophy, the real sequence, the real work. And what I am about to share next, about the invisible costs of a borrowed identity, yinning, and the specific moment when the inside-out transformation becomes irreversible. That is the part of this conversation that changes everything. Stay with me. Standing here is a trap I have watched swallow otherwise capable people whole. They understand at some level that identity matters. They understand that they need to think differently, carry themselves differently, expect more of themselves. And so they go looking for an identity to adopt. And they find one. They find a wealthy person they admire, a mentor, a public figure, a successful neighbor. And they begin to imitate that person, the words, the habits, the style, the posture. And for a while, it seems to work. There is energy in imitation. There is momentum in modeling. But here is the hidden cost. A borrowed identity has no roots. Because when the pressure comes, and the pressure always comes, a borrowed identity cannot hold. It was never yours. You never built it from the inside out. You assembled it from the outside in. And the first strong wind finds out the difference. I have seen this happen many times. A person adopts the vocabulary of wealth. They talk about assets and leverage and passive income. They read the right books, attend the right seminars, associate with the right people. But inside, in that quiet, private room where the real self lives, they have never actually decided they are the kind of person who builds wealth. They have only decided to perform that person. And performance without conviction is exhausting. It is also transparent. The people who have genuinely built the identity can feel the difference immediately. So how do you build a genuine identity rather than a borrowed one? You build it through honest self-examination. You sit down alone without an audience and you ask yourself the hard questions. What do I actually believe about money? What do I actually believe about my own capacity? What do I actually believe I deserve? And then you do the harder thing. You examine those beliefs honestly. Then you ask, where did this belief come from? Is it true? Is it serving me? Or is it an inherited assumption I have never questioned? Ending that examination, honest, private, uncomfortable, is where the genuine identity begins to form. Not in the performance, in the reckoning. Do the reckoning. Standing, it is the most important work you will ever do. I want to talk about something that rarely gets discussed honestly. Most people understand the visible cost of not building wealth, the empty savings account, the financial stress, the limitations on choice and freedom. These are real and they are significant. But there is an invisible cost that is, in my view, far greater. And it is this: the cost of living below your own potential. Every year you spend waiting to have before you decide to be, is a year you spend living as a smaller version of yourself than you are capable of being. And that has a cost that no accountant can measure, but every honest person can feel. You feel it as restlessness, as a low-grade dissatisfaction that you cannot quite name, as the persistent sense that you are capable of more, that there is a version of your life you have not yet stepped into, and the gap between where you are and where you could be is widening, not narrowing. That feeling is not weakness. That feeling is information. It is your deeper self telling you that the sequence is backwards, that you have been waiting to have before you decide to be, ending, and that the waiting itself is costing you more than you realize. Now, let me be honest with you about something else, because I believe in speaking plainly. As some people hear this philosophy and they feel a flash of guilt. They think, I have wasted years. I have been doing this wrong. I am already behind. I want to address that directly. Guilt is not useful here. Guilt looks backward. What I am asking you to do looks forward. The moment you understand the correct sequence is not a moment for regret. It is a moment for decision. The past was lived on whatever philosophy you carried then. The future will be lived on whatever philosophy you choose now. Choose now, not tomorrow. Bunding, the field is in front of you. Season is open. The only question is, which man will you be when you pick up the spade? Drop a 1 in the comments right now if you have ever felt that invisible cost. That quiet sense that you are living below what you are capable of. I want to know. One standing, and I think you need to say it out loud. There is a moment. And I want you to watch for it, because it is easy to miss. When the sequence becomes irreversible, it does not happen all at once. It is not a dramatic event. It is quieter than that. And it happens inside you, not outside you. Here is how to recognize it. You will be in the middle of an ordinary day, doing one of the small disciplines you have committed to. Reading. Thinking carefully about a financial decision. Choosing to invest your time in something that grows you rather than merely distracts you. And you will notice something. You will notice that it no longer feels like effort. Not because the discipline has become effortless. Discipline is always a choice. But because the discipline now feels consistent with who you are. It feels natural. It feels like you. Standing. That is the moment. That is when the identity has taken root deeply enough that it is no longer something you are trying to do. It is something you are. And once you have reached that moment, the sequence becomes irreversible. Not because external circumstances cannot still challenge you. They will. Not because setbacks not still occur. They will. But because the internal foundation is now solid enough that the setbacks no longer shake your identity. They only test your tactics. And a tree with deep roots can lose branches in a storm. It grieves the branches. But it does not fall. You will know you have reached the irreversible moment when a setback makes you work harder rather than making you question whether you were ever worthy of the harvest. Then that shift from maybe I was wrong about myself to this is simply a season I must work through. That shift is the most important one you will ever make. And it is available to you, not in some distant future. It is available to you the moment you decide firmly and finally who you are. I want to talk about the environment of your identity, because no identity forms in isolation. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. I have said this for many years, and I will continue to say it because it is one of the most practically important truths I know. Not just for your habits, not just for your income, for your identity. The people closest to you are constantly, quietly shaping what you believe is normal, what you believe is possible, what you believe people like you can and cannot achieve. If the 5 people around you have be philosophy, if they are all waiting for the windfall before they change, then that philosophy is in the air you breathe every day. And without conscious, deliberate resistance, you will absorb it. Not because you are weak, because you are human. Humans are social creatures. We calibrate to our environment. That is not a flaw. It is a feature that has served our survival for thousands of years. But it means that if you want to change your identity, you must also, at least in part, change your environment. Now, I want to be careful here because I have seen people use this principle as an excuse to be unkind, to abandon people they love, to treat relationships as transactions. That is not what I am teaching. I am teaching that you must be intentional about the voices you allow to shape your philosophy. That means seeking out people, in person, in books, in recorded conversations, who carry the identity you are working to build. It means spending more time with the voices that expand your sense of what is possible and less time with the voices that contract it. You do not have to abandon anyone. You simply have to be deliberate. Ask yourself, of the 5 people whose voices are most present in my life, what philosophy are they teaching me? And is it the philosophy of someone who waits to have before they decide to be? Or is it the philosophy of someone who decides to be and then builds accordingly? Yinin, the answer to that question will tell you a great deal about the harvest you are currently growing. Let me give you one of the most practical expressions of the be, do have sequence. Work harder on yourself than you do on your job. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You are thinking, Tai, already work very hard. I put in long hours. I give my employer my best effort. And I believe you. I am not questioning your work ethic. I am questioning your investment allocation. Here is the distinction I want you to feel. When you work hard on your job, you make your employer's enterprise better. That has value. That is honorable. But the primary beneficiary of that labor is the enterprise, not you. When you work hard on yourself, on your philosophy, your knowledge, your character, your disciplines, your capacity to think clearly and act wisely, you make yourself better. And you carry that improvement with you into every enterprise, every relationship, every season of your life for the rest of your life. The job can end. The employer can change. The economy can shift. But the person you have become, the knowledge you have gathered, the disciplines you have built, the identity you have cultivated, that cannot be taken from you. This is why the wealthy person's investment portfolio always includes themselves, not as an afterthought, as the primary holding. Read every day, not casually, deliberately. Dinning with a pen in your hand and questions in your mind. Study the people who have built what you want to build. Study the principles that govern wealth, not just the tactics. Tactics change. Principles do not. Think every day. Sit in silence and think about your life, where it is going, whether your daily actions are consistent with your stated intentions, what you need to adjust. Most people never do this. And most people are so busy doing that they never stop to think about whether what they are doing is taking them where they actually want to go. And practice the disciplines that the person you intend to become would practice every day. Not when you feel like it, every day, because the feeling of motivation is a visitor. Discipline is a resident, and residents are there whether the visitors show up or not. Work harder on yourself. It is the highest return investment available to any human being. If this is the philosophy that has been missing from your life, if you feel it clicking into place right now, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because this is the kind of message that changes the trajectory of a life. And the person you share it with will remember that you did. If you have stayed with me this far, if you have given this conversation the honest attention it deserves, then I want to say something to you directly. You are not the average viewer. The average viewer stopped watching long ago, looking for something faster and easier. You stayed, and that tells me something about who you are, or who you are deciding to become. Subscribe to this channel, not because I am asking you to, but because you have just demonstrated the exact quality that this philosophy requires, the willingness to invest your attention in something that grows you rather than merely entertains. That is the identity in action. Honor it. What I am about to share in this final section, the moment the sequence completes, and what it looks and feels like when the inside-out transformation finally arrives at the outside. That is the payoff this entire conversation has been building toward. Stay with me for the last mile. I want to bring you back to the field. The second man, the one who saw the harvest before it was planted, did not see his harvest on the first day, or the first week, or even the first season he planted. He watered, he tended, he worked through the dry spells without abandoning his belief in the harvest. He worked through the seasons when nothing visible was happening, trusting the invisible process that he knew was underway beneath the surface. And then one morning, he walked out to his field, and the harvest was there, not as a surprise, as a confirmation. That is what the completion of the bee dough have sequence and feels like. Not a surprise, a confirmation. Because the person who has genuinely adopted the identity of wealth, who has been doing the work of the wealthy person, thinking the thoughts of the wealthy person, then making the decisions of the wealthy person, building the disciplines of the wealthy person, that person does not experience financial growth as luck. They experience it as the natural arrival of something they have been quietly building for a long time. And here is what I want you to understand about that moment, because it is important. The harvest does not change who you are. It confirms who you became. The money, when it arrives, is not the transformation. The transformation happened months or years earlier, in private, when you decided to be the person before you had the evidence. The money is simply the field catching up to the farmer. This is the sequence. Be first, then do, then have. And the philosophy you carry in your mind, the one you choose deliberately from this day forward, that is the seed of every harvest that is still ahead of you. Ding, now let me ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Not for me, but for yourself. What identity have you been waiting to adopt? What version of yourself have you been postponing until the evidence arrives? Name it in the comments. Write it down. Say it out loud. Because the moment you name it, the moment you claim it, the sequence begins. Not someday. Now, and I will tell you something else. Ding, ding, the people who comment, the ones who are willing to say out loud who they are deciding to become, those are the ones who actually follow through. Not because commenting is magic, because naming is an act of commitment. And commitment is the first act of being. Be the person first. Do the things that person does. And have the life that person lives. It is not complicated, but it is not easy. And the distance between those two truths is where your character is built. The field is in front of you. The season is open. Now pick up the spade. The harvest was never waiting for the field to change. It was waiting for the farmer to decide. That decision is yours. Thanks for being here. The end screen has more in this same world, and the next one is waiting for you. Thanks for being here. Pick whichever video on the end screen calls to you.